Greetings, Culture Warriors. It is I, Jeff E.R., the author of Culture is Everything, and your host for this latest dispatch from the front. International story for you today, but one that I think is common to a lot of countries as the lockdowns continue rather unabated. This is from Bloomberg. Enrique Almeida. More Portuguese left the workforce as lockdowns hit the economy. More people dropped out of Portugal's workforce in the 3 months through June amid the government's confinement measures aimed at controlling the coronavirus outbreak. The number of so-called inactive individuals rose 4.1% to 5.3 million from the previous quarter. That had the impact of pushing down the unemployment rate to 5.6% from 6.7% in the previous quarter, the Lisbon-based National Statistics Institute said on Wednesday. Let me just pause here. You may wonder, how does that, if there are less people working, how does the unemployment rate come down? It's because the Portuguese, like here in America, they report an unemployment rate which does not count people who are no longer actively seeking to work. And so this is bad news. Even though the unemployment rate came down 1.1%, it came down because more people are discouraged and given up on their job hunts. So that's bad. The rise in dropouts mainly explains the quarterly reduction observed in unemployment, the Institute said in a statement, adding that the trend could reverse. Portugal's economy shrank a record 14.1% in the second quarter from the first 3 months. In May, the government started easing some of the confinement measures that it introduced in March in a bid to jumpstart the 10 million strong nation. So let's think about that for a second. 10 million people in Portugal, inactive individuals, 5.3 million. Can that even be correct? Because that'd mean that over half your population was not in the workforce, and that seems a little bit high. I know that that looks right. The latest number I have for the population of Portugal is 10.27 million in 2019. Wow. So what do you do when half your population now is not working? Well, that means the other half has to somehow provide for them. Okay, so the 10 million strong nation, it forecasts gross domestic product will shrink 6.9% in 2020 and expand 4.3% in 2021. The number of jobless workers from services businesses decreased 14.5% in the second quarter, while those from industries including manufacturing, construction, and energy fell 21.2%. Okay, but again, ordinarily that would be good news, but in this case, it's people being discouraged. So it's bad news. The number of people seeking their first job fell 36.9%. Youth unemployment rate was at 19.9% in the second quarter. Wow, that is tough. Portugal also benefits a lot from tourism. Of course, that's taken a big hit with the pandemic too. I and my family have never been over to Portugal. I am of Portuguese descent through the Azores. Never been to the Azores either. Well, I'm sorry, I was there once we refueled at Lodges Field, as so many international airlines making the hop over the pond do. But it's an absolutely beautiful country with a lot to see, fantastic food, great people. But man, how can you survive with half your people, more than half, out of work? What do you do? That's not sustainable at all. And when you see the youth so discouraged, I would imagine that you're going to see a lot of emigration from Portugal. These things tend to come in waves, but I think you can see the start of a big wave coming. This is just terrible, terrible news. They've got to lift those lockdowns. Having the virus would be much better than this. And I wonder how many other countries are going to be in a similar situation. So now let's apply our values and cultural lens to this horror story. And I think one of the things it points to is the value of hard work. My family came from the Azores, as I mentioned. My great-grandfather was a fisherman and a bricklayer, and also somewhat later in life, a real estate mogul. So he was someone who knew all about hard work. He worked with his hands, especially earlier in his life. Really later, he did his own repairs on his properties. And then my grandfather came along and followed in his footsteps as a bricklayer. He was actually in a pre-computer age. He was a go-to guy for managing large, complicated construction projects, because somehow magically he was able to keep all of this information in his head and keep things rolling on a job site. So he was very valued for that. My own father was a bricklayer, 42-year union bricklayer, and he was a expert craftsman. The work that he did, he used to drive around the region with pride when I was younger and point out, oh, that's a job I did back in 1958. Still standing. Still looks great. And he would do this with these large and small projects all over the place. He'd be driving through, a more residential area, and he'd be able to point out, oh yeah, I did their steps, or I did their chimney. Terrific craftsmanship. And so I think it's part of the Portuguese culture to have that desire to work, to produce something, to provide for your family. And I can only imagine how difficult it is for people who are kind of wired that way to not be able to work, to have no real outlet for that. Now, just because somebody's not in the official workforce, I know there are black markets, certainly in countries that are heavily socialist like Portugal is. Probably a large number of those people are not sitting at home, but rather making money in a way that doesn't trigger the excessive taxation that also exists in the country. And the Portuguese are very wily, very clever as a general rule. So I would imagine that many of them have found ways to get by, which may not be the most licit ways of doing so. It also helps that the Portuguese, as my wife will tell you, are known for our cheapness. And so when the chips are down, the money can get saved, the pennies can get pinched. That's also part of the national character, I believe, of the Portuguese. But when it comes to hard work, well, that's a value that the Portuguese share with Americans. Indeed, a lot of times we will value hard work over the results of that hard work. And so you'll hear in a lot of cases, even when the output is substandard and not acceptable, well, yeah, but I worked hard. I hear that from my children all the time. And we do value effort, certainly, but perhaps we should value the results even more. And this also speaks to another value that we talked about some weeks ago that's very important, especially in these times, and that's hope. The American dream, as we call it, is built around this value. It's the notion that if I work hard, that Puritan concept of always being productive. If I work hard, if I do what I'm supposed to do, if I'm a good citizen, a good patriot, if I honor God, if I do those things, then I can improve the lot of myself and my family. Because America is the land of opportunity. That's something that we Americans, we believe in our soul. It's hard to root out, even in times like this when opportunities dwindle. But we believe you just give us a shot, we'll take that chance, we'll make it happen, and we'll all reap in the rewards of that. You need that hope in order to do anything great. Who sets out on an untried venture? Who gets into a ship heading over the horizon? Who lays the foundation for a great building? Who designs the next product that's going to set the world on fire? Who begins that effort with so much uncertainty and so much risk and so much unknown? Who puts in that kind of hard effort with no expectation, realistically, that you're going to see the fruits of your labor? The reason why socialist regimes crumble economically is that they remove hope from the people who do the work. Oh, the party nomenclatura, the names, the big names. Oh, they have hope of advancement, but their advancement is based on how well they oppress their fellows. There's a story that Solzhenitsyn tells near the beginning of the first volume of the Gulag Archipelago. And it's a story where Stalin was being feted. And so all these Russian men wearing their uniforms from the Great Patriotic War that had ended not that long before are at a party where, as was typical, the vodka flowed freely because Stalin, who was a teetotaler, Stalin liked to be able to judge a man when he was in his cups. He liked to know who was truly loyal by seeing how they performed when their judgment was impaired. And many a man was sent to the Gulag who couldn't keep his tongue or his head after that first bottle of vodka. And so these men at this gala were confronted with the inevitable toast to the health of the great dictator. And so all rose as one, don't dare be last, and began to applaud. And the applause rang out minute after minute after minute until these men, many middle-aged or older, began to sweat, began to breathe heavy, felt their hands and then their arms grow numb through the exertion, lost their voices in the cheering. And it went on and on and on, no one daring to be the first to stop clapping and sit down. Until one began to wonder how many of these men would succumb to a stroke or a heart attack through the sheer exertion of praising their dear leader? Finally, one brave soul did sit down, stop clapping, allowing the rest a respite from the torturous, mandatory praise. We know this story because that man who sat down was then rounded up in one of the black vans, the Black Mariahs that used to prowl the streets of Moscow in the early hours of the morning, thereby not to disturb the neighbors as they took someone away for the inevitable torture in the Lubyanka, the show trial, and the exile to the Gulag. Because you see, the only hope in such regimes is to be gained by unwavering obedience to the men above you. That's all you can count on in terms of rewards. The people down below, the people who actually make things happen, the best hope that they have is that those Black Mariahs do not come for them one day. What hope do the young Portuguese people have today? That's the question. And that's what we're going to find out. I don't think they can be stifled forever. Thank you and have a great day.